Thanks, Bill, for letting me come and share my story. It's been through quite a season in the last 4 years or so, and one very dark part of the Dark Valley experience, when I cried out to Jesus for help, I said, I'll live through this transparently to your glory, if that's your will. And appears that after a few years it's become his will. So if church in a bar isn't weird enough, I'm going to add to church in the bar playing a progressive metal song for us to review. So music is a huge part of my life, and many times I haven't known what to do with it, but God speaks to me through music, and I don't really have a big difference between, other than praise and worship. I don't have a big difference in my heart between secular music and Christian music, because God made it all in some regard. And some of the lyrics that we find aren't always our most desirable, positive, and uplifting lyrics, are just the cry of a sad heart. And so, without reading ahead too much, I want you to listen to this song, and I want you to feel the song. I want you to listen to the words, but feel the energy, and we're going to talk about it for a moment. Is that song chilling or what? How many of you heard that song before? How many of you listened to it that way before? You can't help but write and think about Jesus when you write. I mean, I don't know what she wrote this song for or who she was writing to, but to me, this is a cry out from the deep inner part of someone's soul for Jesus. I mean, it can't be anything else to me. And in truth, I think that's the cry of so many, in and outside of church. It's this lost hunger for something more, this intimate relationship. I actually really got into this song kind of in the middle of my journey, but it described me. It was who I was. It was even in the middle of doing a ministry and doing lots of church stuff and being heavily involved, I was crying out for Jesus. And here's the funny part: when I listened to that song, and I just discovered this when I pulled the lyrics down to talk to you all. I always thought that little underbreath phrase said, "There's no faith inside," right? Because the truth of the matter is, if we look at faith and how we're actually acting on it, I didn't have any, because I didn't. I always said I was faithful to God. Well, what that meant is I was doing a lot of stuff for Jesus, but I wasn't dependent on Him. It just wasn't how I was living. My intent this morning is just to share a little bit of my story, or specifically zero in on this season of how God got my attention and how things have shifted. And you have to understand a little bit about me. I am probably what I would call these days a generalist. I can hold very much like G. I can hold conversations in a lot of different disciplines with people, and give you the impression that I know a lot about that subject. And the truth is, I probably know a little bit more about than the general population does about a broad number of things, but I'm not really deep in any all but of just a few areas. Unfortunately, you'll find that God's gifts to us and how He's wired us are also the root of our very brokenness. I used that so many times to go places I shouldn't, to do things I shouldn't be doing. It's the old, just because I can, I think I should. Well, and you'll see how it feeds into my brokenness. The phrase I've come up for what I was is I was a plate spinner. So there's a theme of of not really growing up knowing how to manage finances in my life. And so that theme is kind of the undertone of everything. And then the next layer on top of that is being this generalist guy that can do lots of things. Well, I had lots of ways I could generate income. So when there was financial struggle or when things got tight, instead of solving the root problem, I'd just throw another plate on and start spinning it. Oh, great. Well, let me just do this in addition to that. And you can do that for a season. And then eventually you add that last one, and that was the one that you couldn't add. And you're just spinning. Now, the difficulty in being a plate spinner is it takes a lot of energy to keep all the plates spinning. And the fallout from that is my relationship with God, my relationship with my kids, my family, my wife. There's no room for that. You just, I gotta go spin another plate. It's just no way to do anything else. And so around 4 years ago, God was in an event, I'm sure. I don't know if it was him, but he redeems it all. And my financial world, be it as it was, started to unravel. And I remember, I was in ministry, and then I started my own business, and I didn't change my lifestyle. And when I started the business, and just got deeper and deeper in debt, and was able to use debt to service debt for a little while, and that plate eventually ran out. And I had thought I'd hit bottom and turned a corner, and I'd gotten a new job, and we were really focusing on kind of trying to change things. And then through another event, I got a letter from an attorney that basically was asking for a whole nother big chunk of money from another source, which we don't need to go into all that, but that was just, okay, the dark valley experience has begun. And I remember standing in the kitchen with Kim and saying, I can't do this anymore. Because even the slight change in course correction that we'd had was me. There was no God in it. There was no Jesus in it. And I remember saying, I can't do this anymore. Me is not working. God, you got to drive. Jesus, take the wheel. I can't do this anymore. And I remember Kim's comment at that moment. I still remember it. She just looked and she said, I just want my husband back. And I wasn't even fully aware at that point, just somewhat aware that I was gone. And so it was, there was tension and release all at the same time in that moment, standing over the granite kitchen counter in the 3,800 square foot house that I should never have bought, which we later gave away. So I started to do lots of things in order to change. There's just a zillion things that came at me at once, and when all you know is do, you tend to do more things to try to fix what you're doing in the past has done wrong. I remember I used to start my day with this phrase. Truth of the matter is I'd forget to start my day with it, and then I'd live with the guilt of it, the self-inflicted guilt of it. But I'd often start with the phrase, God, what do you want me to do for you today? And I remember it was right after this kitchen event. I remember asking that question of God, and I was really just at that point learning to actually have conversations and listen to God's responses, which was a miraculous thing. And I remember I said, God, what do you want me to do for you today? And he said, or another way to say that is, what filthy rags are you going to give me today? Oh, yeah. Ooh, I've been doing a lot of that. That didn't feel good. And so that caused me to go on a journey, and God brought a lot of resources and things into my life at that point where I began to think about, yeah, that's the root of it all for me, isn't it? It's the doing. I'm trying to do Jesus. Well, what are you asking, Jesus? I don't know anything else. And it's over a long period of time, and it's going to be a journey probably till the day I die. But there's been progress that I've been able to see that Jesus is saying, I don't want you to do me. I want you to be me. And that's been kind of the call in my life lately, is to do less and be in Him more. I love the way Bill started our time this morning, because it's all about being, and being able to take the time and disconnect from the world, even just for a few minutes. The kids and I are always having conversations. Dad, I'm bored, and I've shared with them, that's a really good thing, and you need to learn how to be that. Because that's become sort of a bad thing in our society, and we tend to want to apply some external stimulant on boredom to make it go away. And I think Jesus can meet us in the boredom because we're generally quiet. We're not focused on trying to do all kinds of things to solve our own boredom. A couple other themes that went on in this season. I remember when we used to take trips in the car. My mom used to live in San Diego years ago, and I remember to Kim and I, it was even before kids. It was, how fast can we get to San Diego, And I think our record was 6.5 hours, And it was how fast can we get to San Diego, and can we make it without stopping for gas, and it was always destination focused. And the other part of that is this phrase that always crept into my vocabulary, which was, if I could just. You have that phrase in your life too? If I could just, and it could have been, if I could just get a little bit more money, or if I could just have a little bit more time, or if I could just get to San Diego sooner, or if there was always something to put off some better situation. And I've been learning that Jesus isn't in the if I could just. He's in the let's pretend we're actually going to get there, and we may never, but let's walk together along the way. I remember it's come in so many life lessons. In order to be journey focused as opposed to destination focused, requires space. Well, it took a long time for God to help me to create even the inkling of space in life. In fact, this last 6-8 months in our life, we've had a season of slipping back into the old, and it felt yucky to not have space. I mean, worse than when I was living in it before. It was awful, and I'm just going, not going there again, making change this year, But we were visiting relatives in Arizona, and I remember, for some reason, God, I just said, you know what? We normally do Arizona, and it's a 12-hour trip. We do it in one long shot, and Kim and I, when we were younger, we'd get off work at 7:30, and we'd drive to Arizona and have breakfast with my grandparents. It was just what we did, right? We didn't want to waste half a day, So, I remember driving down the freeway, and we're in the middle of L.A., and it's the only time you're ever on the 5 in the middle of L.A., and it's empty, And I remember I'm passenger and Kim's driving, and I noticed the car slowing down, and we're going about 25 miles an hour on the freeway. I looked over at Kim and I said, "Are you awake?" And she said, "Oh," and just said back up. She was just slowing down on the freeway. She was kind of there. And then about 6 or 7 in the morning, we're on Highway 8 out in the middle of the Arizona desert. And that was the most fun part of one of those crazy drives, is we wanted to change drivers, and it was a 2-lane highway, and we could see miles ahead and miles back, and there was nobody. We just stopped in the middle of the freeway to change lanes. We didn't pull over. It was great. But we went to Arizona and said, you know what, let's make it a twofer. Let's do 2 steps out of this trip. And so we got a hotel, and we did a 4 or 5 hour drive and another 5.5 hour drive on the other side. And it was wonderful. I mean, the kids loved it. In fact, the joke we tell about our kids now is we could say, we're going to go tonight and stay in a hotel somewhere. Yay! It doesn't matter where. They're all in it for the journey. And so we did that, and then I really began to just sit with that it was a Thanksgiving, I think, or some other event, and we were just had time to think, and I went, wow, that was really awesome, and we should do that on the way home. And so we actually took a drive on Route 66 and found some of the old road, went up through Flagstaff, and it was wonderful. And I remember on the way home we went, this is kind of how we want to live. This is how we want to do things. And so, you know, and we went to my mom's at Christmas time, and she's in Temecula, which is about a 7-hour drive. We stayed overnight on that one too. It loved space, and it was great fun. So we've really learned to just be really big on the journey as opposed to the destination, and failing in it repeatedly, but being able to look back and go, oh yeah, we remember how this feels. We don't like this. We should do something different next time. So whenever I catch myself saying, if I could just, or looking over the hill for the next hump, it's a red flag to me. And that's all I try to remember is, okay, Jesus, where am I stepping ahead of you? And that's a difficult thing to do in this society, because this society, the first thing they do is ask you for a plan. You know, I'm in the process of investigating starting a nonprofit aviation ministry for teens that I had the vision of 5 years ago, and God didn't say go, and I was wise enough to pause on it, and now doors are opening, and God's saying step into it. And the world looks at things like that, and they want a plan, and I go, no, God's unfolding this day by day. So it's really, you know, we hear, God, how do you want me to be in you today? I'm really trying to live that real. And this last season, God revealed to me that it was finances, as Kim alluded to, that I still hadn't fully released to him. You know, in order to do some of the things that I think he's calling to this year, I have to voluntarily step out of some income generation things in my consulting practice, and I have to do that. And it's come clear to me. It's the Indiana Jones step out over the chasm. I've got to do that before Jesus will reveal the next step, and that scares the crap out of me. But I'm learning more and more that he's in it, and just because it doesn't necessarily mean that it's all going to be wonderful. It's just that he's still in it. And I just need to remember it's in the mouth of the fish, you know, and that's so hard. And we'll go to church, or we'll go, you know, be around even our Christian friends, and we'll describe them, and they'll go, I don't get it. They don't understand. It's not even that kind of true God faith stepping in action isn't even really something that's spoken a lot about in our faith-based communities. And so it's sometimes, you know, you got to get around your band of brothers who believe in you, and have lunch with guys like Bill who say, this is amazing, you have to do this. And it's funny how we discover, here's an interesting little side comment. When we had our financial crash, and you know, I think there was a whole year we made maybe $20,000, and I didn't have any savings, and went into that year with lots of debt, and it was that's not a great situation. I remember all the people that we used to hang out and do things with at church. Kim and I were noticing that they didn't engage with us. You know, they didn't. I finally figured out they didn't know what to do with us, and it wasn't a judgmental thing at all. I find God really broke my heart for that, and went, they don't know how to be with us. They don't know. Their computers couldn't look at us being happier than we ever had been, and in the middle of a terrible financial situation. They didn't know what to do with that, because so much of what we live in this world is circumstances determine your mood and your attitude and your heart, and we were learning through the School of Hard Knocks to live with those two things not really being related, and that Jesus is the buffer between it all. So it was really, really interesting. And I don't say that judgmentally. I just, I probably, there's pockets in my life where I do the same thing to others. People just don't know how to mix those two emotions. So one of the core questions that I think I could take out of this season of my life was to ask, do I really believe he'll provide? I mean, we hear that from messages like this all the time. Jesus is your provider. Do you really believe that? I mean, do you really believe that? I mean, if he puts a desire on your heart, which is kind of how he drives us, motivates us towards the things that he has, the uses he has for us, the places he wants us to be. If he puts a desire on your heart, can you follow it? I mean, obviously, check it with the people around you that you know and love and live in this, and walk and have a relationship conversationally with Jesus. But, you know, can you do that? What if he said, you know, drop your nets and follow me? That's kind of what he did to the teenage disciples, right? And you know, you can unpack those pieces of scripture and discover that wasn't a light thing that they did. It wasn't just, oh, that guy looks cool, drop the net and follow. It was, you know, the people around him, just like when we were at church, the people around him didn't know what to do with them, right? They didn't know how could you do this? You're throwing away your career. Heard that one, right? Kind of like, because we've spent all this time learning one particular thing and God's calling us another way, people won't go that way because they're holden to this thing called a education that they've had that says, oh, well, I've spent all this, invested in my life this way, and even though God's calling me this way, I have to stay here because I have an investment in, you know, it's hard. Society makes us think that that's really important, but when we really question it, we go, I'm not sure I know where Jesus is in that. I was just going to share a story. But I was reading through, I think, some of the scripture that you are all reading through the Bible, and it's just amazing. I mean, God's just, you know, just bam, here's more, and it relates really closely to what I say. So I'm going to read it. I want to read some of what you've read, but I want to read it out of a Bible you've probably not read it out of. This is The Voice. And The Voice is a really interesting translation in that Guillaume's probably got it on his iPhone, but The Voice is the Bible written in as a story, and it's actually appears in text here as a screenplay, and it was translated by scholars and musicians and screenwriters and a whole host of artisan type people, and it's a really, really fun thing to read. How am I doing on time? Okay, so let me read. I'm going to read it, Matthew 20. And just if you don't have The Voice in front of you, just let this soak into you. You don't have to go search for it. And I'm at about verse 16. Then a young man came up to Jesus, and it says, "Young man, teacher, what good deed can I do to assure myself eternal life?" I mean, I read that and I went, okay, all right, Jesus, more do, right? He asked, "What can I do?" "Strange that you should ask me what is good. There is only one who is good. If you want to participate in his divine life, obey the commandments." "Which commandments in particular?" "Well, to begin with, do not murder, do not commit adultery, do not steal, do not give false testimony, honor your father and mother, and love your neighbor as yourself." "I've kept those commandments faithfully. What else should I do?" Here's a little side comment in the Voice here. Jesus looked at the man and could see that he was very earnest, wanted to be taught, and wanted to know what he needed to do to participate in God's reality. Jesus knew his shoulders would sag under the weight of the next hard instruction. Jesus says, "If you want to be perfect, go and sell all your possessions and give all your money to the poor. Then you'll have treasure in heaven. And then come, follow me." The young man's shoulders did indeed sag, and he went away sad, because he was very wealthy indeed. Now, I think, you know, to some, that passage is basically saying, sell all your possessions to the poor and come serve me. And I think you'll miss one of the things that Jesus is trying to say with that. In this particular case, that man who was trying to be righteous was very wealthy. And Jesus was just saying to him, be willing to give away the thing that is very most important to you, your wealth. And then you can have my heart. And that's still hard to this day, isn't it? I mean, as a consultant, one of the things that I'm learning is God did wire me as a generalist, and there's value in me bringing a breadth of knowledge that's not necessarily very hugely deep to a particular area. The problem is, as a consultant, that's a short meeting, right? Because you're having the big picture conversation, and not trusting him for finances, my next step says, well, the money's in the implementation, so I'm supposed to be the implementer as well, right? And for me, the big picture generalist conversations are life-giving. The implementation and tactical components for much of it, not all of it, but much of it is life-taking for me. And so it's something I have to constantly, battle with and say, okay, Jesus, I'm going to do the part that's life-giving, and that doesn't mean I don't do the tactical part here and there. But Jesus wants me to focus on the other components. But the problem is, in the face of, do you trust me? Do I trust him with his money? Or do I trust him with my money? In other words, am I willing to say, okay, I'm going to walk away from this other piece and stay where you're calling me to? It's scary. But I constantly feel like I'm shaking my head because he meets me there every time. There was another piece here that I wanted to read that was fun. Where are we? It was Matthew 20. The kingdom of heaven is like a wealthy landowner who got up early in the morning and went out, first thing, to hire workers to tend his vineyard. He agreed to pay them a day's wage for the day's work. The workers headed to the vineyard while the landowner headed home to deal with some paperwork. About 3 hours later, he went back to the marketplace. He saw some unemployed men standing around with nothing to do. Do you need some work, he said? Go over to my vineyard, and join the crew there. I will pay you well. So off they went to join the crew and vineyard. About 3 hours later, and then 3 hours after that, the landowner went back to the market and saw another crew of men and hired them too, sending them off to his vineyard and promising to pay them well. Then finally, late in the afternoon at the cusp of night, the landowner walked again through the marketplace and saw the other workers still standing around. Why have you been standing here all day doing nothing? Because no one has hired us. Well, you should go over to my vineyard and put in a few moments of work. And off the workers went. When quitting time arrived, the landowner called his foreman. Pay the workers their day's wages, beginning with the workers I hired most recently and ending with the workers who have been here all day. So the workers who had been hired just a short while before came to the foreman, and he paid them each a day's wage. Then the workers who had arrived midday came to the foreman, and he paid each of them a day's wage too. Finally, the workers who'd been toiling since early morning came, thinking they'd be paid more, but the foreman paid each of them a day's wage. As they received their pay, this last group of workers began to protest. We've been here since the crack of dawn, and you're paying us the exact same wage you paid the crew that just showed up. We deserve more than they do. We've been slogging in the heat of the sun all day. These others haven't worked nearly as hard as we have. The landowner heard these protests. Friend, no one has been wronged here today. This isn't about what you deserve. You agreed to work for a day's wage, did you not? So take your money and go home. I can give my money to whomever I please, and it pleases me to pay everyone the same amount of money. Do you think I don't have the right to dispose of my money as I wish? Or does my generosity somehow prick at you? And that is your picture. The last will be the first, and the first will be the last. I read that and I thought, wow, is that ever a great illustration of how God rewards our doing? Right? I mean, he calls us to certain things and we question the wage. And yet, out of his true and full generosity, he pays everyone. He gives us the same. We all have, there's nothing we can do to Jesus to make him love us more. The converse of that is, and I'm learning to live this every day, there's nothing we can do any day to make him love us any less. How many of us say, gosh, Jesus feels really distant today? I've been there. Who moved? We did. In fact, he probably followed us because he's never farther or distant away. He may seem silent, or we may be functioning in the shame of some sin that we're in the middle of that makes us feel like we're not worthy of his love, but it's there. It's constantly there. Is this resonating at all with anybody? So we've done church in a bar, we've done progressive metal rock in church in a bar. Now we're just going to do plain old metal in a bar. I got another song for you. This one's by the band POD. And you probably all heard this song. POD is Payable on Death. It's actually a Christian band. This song speaks to me as a theme of how I want to live and don't always do so well in my current walk with Him. And if you'll notice, it's a shift from the first song. Just look at the title. The title of the first song is Bring Me to Life, the cry out for Jesus for more, and I still have that same cry. That cry is not gone. But in other moments, the cry is how alive I feel in Him when I walk with Him in His Spirit. This is the funny thing is this is actually, I guess they call this metal, and the funny part is this is what they call the semi-acoustic version. And when I listen to it, all I can tell is I think maybe there's one less electric guitar, and I think you can hear an acoustic guitar in there if you listen really carefully. Again, let this song bathe over you. If it's not your style of music, don't worry about it. You'll get over it. The chorus of that song just gives me goosebumps anymore. But a couple verses that really hit me in this song is, it's beyond my control. Sometimes it's best to let go, like all the time. Whatever happens in this lifetime, so I trust in love. That's kind of what I'm trying to walk in these days, and it's not easy all the time. But I sense God in it every corner. But there's a part that goes along with that. It's the next highlighted thing that says, even though it might cost me everything. And when that means everything, really, I think to me it means everything that I may hold as important, and a lot of material things and comfort in this world, in this life. And I'm just learning to shift very slowly that comfort over to Jesus. I want to leave you with just some questions that you can take on your own time. To process through kind of what I've been talking about. And the first question is on the point of arrival, where I mentioned earlier, where I'm kind of trying to shift from journey to destination to journey. First question is, what arrival destination would you like to give Jesus? Where in your life is there if I could just, that you'd like to lay at the foot of the cross? Doesn't mean it's going to go away. It's just being willing. To me, 5 years ago, one of the big things it was aviation. The biggest passion in my heart. Guillaume didn't even know this. Biggest passion in my heart is flying airplanes and sharing them with others. And it was so strong, I had to say, Jesus, I put this at the foot of your cross, and I give it back to you. And if it's your will, then someday you'll bring it back to me. But I don't know what to do with it. It's too strong. So that was one. Number two is, what part of my life could stand to be a little bit more be and a little less do? And the third one is, what have I been owning as if it's all up to me that I can simply give to Jesus? Because really, none of it's up to you other than this day and asking Him where He'd like you to be. I thank you for letting me share my story with you. I hope it touched your heart.